Well, welcome everybody. My name is Chris, and I'm broadcasting today with Ashley-Nicole Russell. She's an attorney in North Carolina. She's on the board of the National Parents Organization. Thanks for coming on today, Ashley.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. Tell us a little bit more about yourself. You're an attorney and you have firms across the state there in North Carolina.
Yes, so we are based here in North Carolina, and my firm, A&R Law, or a negotiated resolution, is across the state of North Carolina. We have firms in Greenville, Raleigh, and Beaufort. And so we like to spread the awareness of collaborative family law and alternative dispute resolution processes across the state.
Well, that's fantastic. And so, how long have you been an attorney?
Almost a decade.
Oh, wow.
Pretty
And
amazing.
have you always done family law, or have you worked in other areas?
Always family law. Even when I was in undergrad, I went to Appalachian State University, and I was actually there during the three national championships and beating Michigan, which was a lot of fun at App State. But I was a mediator
Okay.
in district court the entire time I was in undergrad, and so I went straight from there to law school. And I already knew, that I had found that there were all these alternative dispute resolution processes that people just really didn't even know about. My parents had had a terrible divorce. And when I became a mediator, I realized how many people and how many families' conflict resolution skills were helping. And so I went down that path and I went to a law school that actually had a dispute resolution institute. And I got certified in dispute resolution and started my collaborative family law practice straight out of law school, which was crazy because I began a new area of the law in a new geographic area and started from scratch myself. And but it was amazing. It was a wonderful journey, and I'm really glad that I'm here today. And we've been able to grow immensely, and people have really been looking for this process where they could figure out how to divorce healthy. And we've been spreading awareness about how to avoid the litigation system if you can, and to divorce healthy outside of court. And so now we have offices across the state of North Carolina, and we are really involved with NPO and the national efforts to help promote understanding and awareness around lots of issues: shared parenting, child support, equality, etc.
And that's fantastic. So, break it down a little bit because I think collaborative law is something that's a little bit foreign to most people that are, involved in this space, right? I think a lot of people think if you're going to get divorced, you either agree
You
on
got to go to
everything
court.
or you got to go to court, right? So what's different between collaborative law and, what our traditional thoughts are on the divorce system?
It's evolved. So it's basically, the law in general is archaic. That's good because it holds the line. We don't want it to change too rapidly because, in a lot of ways, we want it to stay the same so that we can very steadily pace through what then becomes history. But in the family context, the law was really never designed to be there in the first place. And so involving the litigation system in the family doesn't really make a lot of sense. There's a verses in the middle. It's titled just like a boxing match. Like, the family doesn't belong there because children need stability, and we know that now more than ever, just based on child psychology. And so, collaborative law really is entrenched in a lot of those efforts. So it's saying you don't agree, you may not like each other, but you do want to keep your assets, you want to protect your children from devastating mental health issues, and you want to come out of this on the other side in a place where you can move forward and be a whole person. Why do you want to go through a divorce process or a custody battle if you weren't ever married, if you're going to come out on the other side in a terrible place, So it doesn't really make sense to throw everything up in the air for it to not try to get better on the other side. And so collaborative family law really focuses on that. Both parties have an attorney, so that's an amazing part of it. The attorneys are involved, but they contract to not go to court. So what they do is take their interest out of it. There's no interest for them to make money off of animosity. So it puts everything back on in a level playing field. It is an interesting concept. The name collaborative family law has been very interesting in its uptake. I think it's hard for people to understand that they don't have to go to court. But it is a place where people are really coming to now. The world is falling apart around us. People can't really afford to elect to go into a litigation process and have that be complete turmoil too anymore. There's just too much turmoil.
Yeah, and so what's interesting to me is so how do I mean, if you want to do a collaborative divorce, how do you go about that? Do you, I mean, I'm assuming there's certain attorneys that you work with because I don't think all the attorneys probably are into this, right?
Nope.
So, I mean, party decides they want to get divorced. Do they come to you together? Do they, you
They
know?
can, so collaborative is the only place where you can in most states, and each state's going to be different. So you're going to need to check your state.
Mhm,
Um, but collaborative, the parties can come and find collaborative and understand the process. They can't get any legal advice together in general. Now,
mhm,
again, I am only licensed to practice law in North Carolina, but there are a lot. But contract law can be governed across, the
j-
nation under a contract, depending on where that contract's rules. Just like if you have Verizon, you sign a contract to get your phone. Obviously, you
mhm,
may not live in the same place that Verizon is established. So it's very similar to that contract law. But most people didn't know that they could resolve their disputes in contract law, that they didn't have to have a judge order what they wanted to do, that they could, two people as American citizens and whatever state that they're residents of, come to an agreement, fortify that in a contract, and have a legally binding contract. Most people just have no idea, but it's because the litigation system is a very thriving industry. So,
sure.
let's just be realistic about supply and demand, obviously. And so it is up to the parent to say, I choose collaborative. I'm doing collaborative. This is what we're doing. I'm protecting my children. I'm not going to go seek advice from someone who's not on the route that I want to be on, which is the collaborative path. So that's a difference of mentality, to be purposeful with your process choice. I will say that that one decision will lay the groundwork for the rest of exactly how your entire process folds and unfolds. And it's a really important decision. I cannot stress that enough.
Well, it certainly sounds like it takes a lot of the emotion out of this, and a lot of the fighting and the unnecessary, back and forth to court kind of thing.
It
Um,
de-escalates it. We are trained to de-escalate instead of
okay.
escalate, which is a huge, when you're trying to achieve conflict resolution and have a resolution, that is a necessary component. And so that's the biggest piece that's been missing. And we add that back in a lot of ways. But so your question was, where do you find this? So let's say you're in Nevada and you want to have a collaborative attorney. Then you're going to need to go to, there's an international association of collaborative professionals. So you can Google that, type that in, see if you find somebody on a map. Then you could just type in Nevada collaborative attorneys. And there are going to be a lot of attorneys that pop up that may not necessarily be trained. So do your
Mhm.
due diligence, check the person that you're looking at. You should try to find someone whose character is reflective of your character. That's, what you want to do. There are a lot of tricks in the trade of divorce and custody, and we want to try to remove, there should be no tricks. These are families. At the end of the
Mhm.
day, these are children. This isn't Halloween. We don't need tricks. Like, this is very important decisions. We want to be forthright with information, make informed decisions. That way children have stability and people have stability, and then everyone can move on. And that's a huge piece, just because we see it playing out in our statistics. My book, The Cure for Divorce Culture, really outlays the historical perspective of what's brought us to today, so people can really understand the system and what happened. How did we get here? And then it explains the statistics of where we're at, which are grueling and they're sad. They're very sad, but we are on the other side of that. So the pendulum has swung, and now we're coming back because people are seeking healthy divorce everywhere now. And so it's kind of a beautiful thing to be a part of the process. I know people are like, "Ah, so sad what you do," and I'm like, really, what I do is bring people to a better place, though. So
Right.
it is different what I do, and it isn't sad. And I see people do it all the time, and it seems like such an impossibility, to be able to divorce healthy. Seems like an oxymoron, but it really isn't.
And so, how much can somebody save? I mean, I don't need exact numbers, but just time and money. I mean, I can imagine that this collaborative, process is much faster and a lot less expensive than traditional litigation.
You're paying for an efficient process, an evolved process. You're paying for our skills in conflict resolution and communication and de-escalation. And so you're paying to have a process that's already built for you to have success. almost all of our cases succeed in collaborative. I personally have not had a case that's failed in collaborative. And so, it's very important to find a process that works for you. And this process is structured to be able to help you get to resolution. And so most people it takes, 3 to 6 months to finalize everything. And that's pretty groundbreaking in the world of what we deal with. I know people who are still settling their property 12 years later in the litigation system. And obviously children, people stay in the litigation system until the day they turn 18 and a lot of times. And so it really avoids that, but you can come back. So we build what's called the container, which is where the two clients or the two custodial parents and the two attorneys sit, and we're removed from litigation and we sign a contract saying that we're not going to litigation. And so that allows the clients to be in what we call the container, because those conversations are safe. They have rules around them. They cannot be produced in court. They're confidential. And then, if let's say we come to your agreement and 6 years down the road a new person enters into this as a step parent and things start to go chaotic, and you are like, well, how do we handle this? Well, you can come back to the container and we can help you come up with a new agreement or just talk through it. I mean, it's just that there's not that threat in the background of, okay, well, I'm going to take you to court. And I know the person that says that threat feels real powerful, but at the end of the day, that threat really means you've spent a lot of money, you have a lot of heartache, and you can't even measure the damage that's been done to your child. It's not a good decision.
Yeah, anybody that's been through that process of going to court in a contentious, family law litigation, just I don't know anybody that goes through that and says, "Oh, that was great. That really worked out well." You
Yeah.
know,
There's no real winners over there. And
no, everybody loses. Everybody
it's
loses.
sad. And, we can see it now. We have statistics. So do the due diligence, read the statistics, see who the people who have come before you and the woes
Hmm.
that they have had, and do not take that path. That's kind of what we're preaching. And I think that really it used to be a sermon on the mount. I used to be like, speaking and trying to get people to hear, and now people come to me. So
That's
it's
awesome.
changed, which is really cool. And
Fantastic.
yeah, so
That's great. Well, tell me, I want to hear a little bit about National Parents Organization because you're on the board for National Parents Organization. You're doing a lot of great work around the country. And just tell us a little bit about how you became involved with National Parents Organization and what your role is there and maybe where you see the future there.
yeah, so I think that NPO is an incredible organization. I was part of the Lincoln Center where the report card was shared in New York, and what the work just with that awareness. It's so much about awareness. What we're all doing is awareness. We want people to understand what the consequences are, what the effect is, what's happened over a series of time that we've now all studied, and then what are other people doing that's working that we can learn from, or what mistakes are people making that we can learn from. We should all be wanting to understand that, because these are families and these are children. And so that's, I think, a big hub of that want for knowledge, and then the providing of knowledge is the National Parents Organization. I think there are a lot of people in a lot of different states that are organizing, and NPO is helping that in a lot of ways. I think that it's good to have a central source that is able to kind of help this parachute fly. I say all the time that it's a lot like the Verizon coverage map. Verizon's getting a lot of coverage here, but but the red lines that go across the state and connecting all of the different poles, it's a lot like that, because there are people in every state that are trying to change their state for the better through shared parenting efforts, or through collaborative efforts, or through help with child support equality and things like that. So it's kind of amazing to be a part of it all, and to be a child of divorce where my parents didn't do it the right way, and to see this all transpire for future generations has been really awesome. And I think that NPO has been a central source of all of that.
Yeah, National Parents Organization has definitely brought a lot of people together, and we've made a lot of progress. And I think there's been a lot of noise made, and there's a lot of awareness now about this issue that you didn't have, 10 or 15 years ago. So, what's the future? You think, what are you seeing at the state levels? Where do you think we're going to be in 5, 10 years? What do people have to look forward to as far as changing the divorce laws, or maybe collaborative law becoming more of a mainstream thing for people?
The future is bright. It is really bright. I think that COVID has actually showed a lot of people that the courts can close down, that they want something that's a better, healthier option, that they want something that's not as contentious. And I really think that it's turned the tide. Divorce rates are rising, but I would say that also healthy divorce rates are increasing. Healthy options are increasing. People are choosing to do it in this wave, in a way that's better. And I think it's because they have a lot more understanding now. They have a lot more information. They have a lot more tools to work with, and that's because of the efforts of a lot of us. And I think that that's really great. So I think collaborative is going to become a lot more widespread. I think there's going to be a lot of online collaborative sessions, and Zooming for collaborative is actually pretty easy. People are very comfortable, not necessarily having to get in a room to do it, but still being present through their process, not having someone else just decide for them what's going to happen. And so I think that that's going to, uptick in the future for us here with divorce. I think that parents are a lot more aware of what's happening to their children in divorce, and they're not exposing them to a lot of that stuff any longer. And I think that things are just starting to change. Mediation's on the rise, and I think that when it comes to child support and those types of filings, I think that those are going to decrease over time because people are going to make those commitments between themselves as a contract and not necessarily have to go to the court. Kids are really starting to go look at what their child support order was. Just think about when your 25-year-old in college, as a part of a project for one of his human development classes, is told to go see if there's ever been any court filings. And he looks at his child support order for $700 a month and then goes and asks mom, why did that, do I have a price tag? And that's actually
Hmm.
starting to happen. A lot of this stuff is becoming public record. A lot of state courts are going to online databases. And so, the information that's going to be out there, these filings, these, incredibly adversarial litigious filings are on the down because parents don't necessarily want their kids to see that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good conversation around transparency because courts traditionally haven't been very transparent, and now with as much information as available to us online, things are becoming very transparent at a rapid rate. And so, kids I think are asking more what's fair and what isn't, and that becomes a factor where I don't think that was a factor 15, 20 years ago.
Yep. And now we have millennial divorces, and they do everything differently. And so they are very absolutely not into having a knockdown drag out fight. They're too busy traveling the world. And so
Right.
they were. But I think that it's just they handle things a lot differently too. So the system is just changing because it's keeping up with that. And what a beautiful thing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Have you seen any conflict in the court itself where you've got these old established judges that have been there for 30 years and this is sort of a new thing and they don't want to change, or what have you seen around that?
I would say more the litigation attorneys themselves are not very happy with it. The judges are happy for an alleviation of docket. I mean, these cases aren't coming before them. They're already overburdened with cases. They can't possibly decide the life of a child in 3 hours in a hearing,
Right.
but they have to, and so the judges are happy about collaborative. I think that the other litigation attorneys, because they're resistant to change, and in reality, litigation is a very lucrative business. I think that there's a contentious nature there. I do think that litigation attorneys are starting to get trained in collaborative so that they can say that they can do it. But hey, I got to tell you, eventually it's going to flip. It's
Yeah.
going to be collaborative. People are going to stop using the system unless they have to. It's going to kind of go back to a balanced state. It got way out of control, and we have statistics and mental health issues that prove that. And so I think it's going to go back to that place. And I think that all the attorneys will acclimate to that. It will take time, but I think that timeline has been advanced because of COVID.
Well, that's the silver lining for COVID, I think, right?
That's what I've been saying. You got to find it somewhere.
Everybody learned to Zoom or do a call, and nobody has to travel anymore.
Exactly.
So you do a lot of promotion of this collaborative technique, and one of the things you have is a podcast, and I want to bring that up here. And it's the Divorce Healthy podcast. And tell us, I've listened to several of these; they're fantastic. But
Thanks.
tell me a little bit about how did the podcast come around, and what are some of the goals for the podcast, and what can people expect when they listen to it?
Well, let me tell you about my goal. My goal is to change divorce in America. So, my goal is to achieve changing how divorce is handled in all of America so that I can alleviate generations of children to come. My life was transformed because of my parents' divorce, and not such a positive way, though now it is silver lininged around back to being amazing. But initially, it was really bad. And so, my goal is to change that. And the way that I change that is with awareness. So, the podcast is a really big push on awareness. NPO has a huge piece of this awareness factor. I have billboards going up all over to try to push this awareness. So, the only reason people don't choose this is because they don't know about it. That's just the reality. And so, the more that they know, the more that they will choose to avoid, the system that is not necessarily made for them. Now, of course, if there's a high level of conflict or there's something crazy going on and you absolutely have to go to the court system, then it's there for you, and it's built to be able to handle it. But if you can choose an option that's better for your family once you decide that, then I want to make sure that you know about it so you can make that choice. That's my goal, is that every American at least knows that there's multiple options that when they're making that decision.
Yeah, and it's so important, I think, to get that information out there, because how else are they going to get that information? I think, attorneys. You mentioned before that it was the judges that are happy about this. It's the attorneys that maybe are not so happy. And let's face it, attorneys love to argue. I mean, you guys love to go into court and knock each other down. I mean, that you guys, I think, live for that stuff.
We
But
do well with conflict.
yeah, but that's what you guys are good at, but it's also very expensive, right? And so I don't think that attorneys are, I think, they're not necessarily out there advertising this stuff. So people have to find out about it a different way. So that's fantastic
Exactly.
that you have that podcast, and you've got a lot of different topics that you talk about on there. It's not just about the same thing over and over. So there's a lot of good variety there.
Yeah, we have all these experts. So, the one thing that I truly believe in is whenever I was at the YMCA growing up, and, spending a lot of my time as my parents were putting their lives back together, I played this game called the parachute game where we all had to stand in a big circle. And if we fluffed this huge piece of material, we could sit on it and sit under there for forever. It would hold the air and it would lift, and we could, have so much fun. And I really feel like that's what we're dealing with here, is the more that we unite everyone across the nation, the more that Google itself will pick up what we're talking about and register and understand it. And everyone else will too, in the same way, just because they will hear about it and it will be talked about and people will hear about it. And the more that that happens, the more that we've lifted and we've all kind of rose the lake together. And when the lake rises, all the boats go up together. And so that's kind of really what we're trying to do, is flip the lake.
Well, that's awesome. And what's funny is I remember doing that game in school too, and that only worked. The parachute thing only worked if everybody worked together. If there was
Hmm.
even one person that just didn't get the timing right, that none of the air stayed in,
Yeah,
and
and
you
you
had to
had
do
to
it all
have it
over
from
again.
everywhere. It couldn't be from one source. You couldn't have everyone on one side of the parachute. You had to have the whole map,
Yep,
and I
all
think that
around.
that's such an important piece of it.
That's awesome. And you also have a book out here. I'm going to put that up on the screen now, and it's called "The Cure for Divorce Culture." And tell me a little bit about how that came about and what people can learn in it. And I can see you can read it for free on Kindle Unlimited, or you can get a paperback version of it as well.
Yeah, we did the free on Kindle, because we wanted people to have, access to it if they could possibly get access to it. And then the podcast obviously is free. And then we also have, there's apps like applications like Fair, the co-parenting app. They're really trying to help with transparency as well. And if you go to our social media, there's a percentage for that off, because we know it's difficult right now and we're trying to, do the best that we can. But the book is amazing. It's a manual. It's only 200 pages. It's a short read. It's not scary or intimidating. You can read it again. It will give you tips and tricks and tools to be able to get through this in the most healthy way possible. I think that it really gives you an understanding, it gives you awareness, and it gives you a perspective, a 30,000-foot view. Instead of standing beside the rook and holding it, you're sitting up above the board, looking down, playing chess with this book. And I think that that's an important perspective to have when you're making decisions about every important aspect of your life.
Yeah, information certainly is key, I think, and when you're divorcing, right, whether it's contentious or not, information certainly changes the trajectory. for people, both sides, both sides of the divorce. So that's fantastic. Really like that you have that out there for free that people can read it if they've got Kindle Unlimited. And is this a book that you tell your clients to go read when they become a new client, or how does that
Every
work?
client gets the book as part of their representation, and it is definitely their homework to read it ahead of time. It also has my story in it, of my life, and it's very relational. And I think
Hmm.
that people when they read it, they really kind of get an understanding, like a true understanding of how to navigate this. And isn't that what everyone's looking for in this time? So
Oh yeah,
it's such
absolutely.
a helpful piece.
So anything else you want to bring up before we close out?
Thanks so much for having me. For all the listeners out there, I know that it may seem daunting right now, whatever it is that you're going through. We all find this place, not from the best of circumstances generally. And I think that I believe in you. I've made amazing things happen in this industry that a lot of people patted me on the head and told me weren't possible. So don't believe that it's impossible for your case either. You just do have to be confident and do the work and provide the character to your case yourself, and that's an important piece of it. So reach out to us if you need any inspiration. You can find us at A&R Law. And thanks so much for having me, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for coming on, and we look forward to bringing you on again. The work you're doing is absolutely incredible, and we really thank you for changing the way that people get divorced.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.